All right, perfect. So good morning. Welcome back to day 3 of this course. So a few things before we get started. Remember the scientific calculator. Make sure you have one or using the online one. Yesterday we had some pretty good participation in class discussion. So, keep that up. See if you can try to volunteer as much as possible so we can facilitate some quality discussions. Feel free to raise your virtual Zoom hand, ask questions anytime. And then try to turn in after class work on time. I know that's gonna be a little bit difficult, but we will be actually going over the day 2 after class work right now because I looked over some of the work and I feel like I wanted to clarify some things. So let me actually get there. Day 2 after class work. All right, can everybody see day 2 after class work? Okay, lovely. So I'm just going to go through the questions and then, compare with your own answers, or, if you still haven't done it yet, it's fine. We're going to be grading pretty leniently. It's not going to be too harsh. So just don't worry about it. Just get it in if you can. So the first question. If you place money into a special bank account with 4% annual interest while the inflation rate is 2%, what will happen to your wealth over time and why? I'd usually, I would just like ask you all and then open up the floor for answers, but we're running on short time right now. So I'll just tell you the answer is your wealth will grow over time. And this is because the interest rate outpaces the inflation rate. So usually this usually never happens, right? Bank accounts usually don't have that high of a annual interest rate, but this one you found a special one that has 4%, and that obviously is greater than 2%. So your money is gaining value faster than it's losing value. All right, the next one. If you deposit $30,000 into a savings account with a 1% annual interest rate, how much money will you have in a year? Now, I don't know if we covered this, but I'm pretty sure it was in the video. So let me just quickly calculate this. So it says 30,000 in a savings account with 1% annual interest rate, and it just says 1 year. So and we're going to be looking over the formula today as well for calculating this kind of stuff because we're looking at time value of money. But it's just 30,000, 1.01 to signify, that it's 1% interest rate, and then of course a 1 year for the year, and that gives 30,300. So there's that. The next one's a little more, let's see. So very similar, but now it's 30 years. So you just change that to 30, and that gives you $40,435. All right, that was pretty easy. Jonathan wishes to open up an account that he can link to a debit card and pay expenses with. What type of account should he open? He should open a checking account, right? Because debit cards are linked to checking accounts. They don't link to other types of accounts. All right, the next one. I think this one tripped a lot of people up. I only saw a few right answers for this, but Gwen is planning for an expensive vacation to Hawaii that will happen next summer. What type of account should she deposit money into to maximize her interest earnings? Now she can deposit it in a savings account, but if she wants to maximize her interest, she should deposit it into a certificate of deposit, right? She should deposit in what's called a CD because she knows that it's going to happen next summer. She has a set time in which this expense is going to happen, so she can put it into a CD that matures right before then. And CDs earn a greater interest than savings accounts. So, all right, the next one. The Smith family wants to set up an emergency fund. Which type of account should they open? This would be savings usually. Money market is fine, but this is savings. Abby wants to link her Venmo account to a bank account. What type should she link her Venmo? What type should she link her Venmo to? Sorry if you didn't know what Venmo is. It's like this digital app where you can wire money to each other really easily, and those link to your checking account, right? Because you're making rapid expenses, or you're depositing money in rapidly. So only checking accounts really allow that to happen, because savings accounts, they're like, oh, well, you can't withdraw it too many times a month, right? So that wouldn't work with a Venmo account, or especially if you're using it actively. Okay, so there's that. Is there any questions before I move on? Yes, Esther.
Don't CDs like mature in like 1 or 2 years or something?
Well, there are different types of CDs, right? And you'll see this in the investing game. You can pick the length of maturity, right? Because they offer different products. So you're like, oh, here's one that matures in three months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 10 years. The catch is, and I think you might understand why, is that the longer the maturity date, the higher the interest rate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes more sense.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, perfect. Let's move on. Let me go back to sharing my presentation and we'll get started. Okay, so today we're talking about time value of money, a very important topic. So we're going to look at the power of compounding interest, present and future value, loan decision making, and finally we're going to be playing this. Hold on, I'm on the wrong slides. We're going to be playing this loan shark game where we're simulating predatory lending, and this kind of actually goes back to Pillar 5.
What is a loan shark?
Well, you'll find out. You'll find out. So, very interesting stuff for us in the near future. So, a quick TVM discussion. What would you do with $100 if it were given to you right now? A lot of different answers, possibly. Andrew.
Save it in a bank account.
Save it in a bank account? Okay. That's a good answer. Harrison?
I would say 50% to my bank account and the other 50% back to this, like my EDF. So then even because I don't want to put all of it because I have a large chance of losing it all. So I'm going to put up only 50%.
How, well, I mean, how cheap are your ETFs? I mean,
ETFs can get really, really cheap, and it goes down to, because ETFs are basically just a percentage of a thing. So it's
no, I get
like,
that, but no, but how cheap are yours?
It gets to $8, but the cheapest one I have is $7, $8.
All right. Well, it's quite interesting. You might have to send me what ETFs you're investing in afterwards. Any other takers on what you would do with $100 if it were given to you right now? Sorry, let me try to access the chat. Spend it. I don't need to save now. Okay, Sean. What would you spend it on?
I don't know what I'll spend it on. I'll just spend it on something.
Okay. Ferrer says invest. It's pretty good, just like what Harrison was saying. Brandon, probably use it with my other money to buy stuff to repair my iPad. Yikes. Rest in peace, your iPad. Alazong, save for emergency. Yes. Put it in checking account. Okay. Yeah. 50-30-20 rule. Yeah. Glad to know that you remember that. I'll probably spend it because my savings account doesn't give me interest. Fair, very fair. By spending it for things that you want. Well, I mean, you should specify what you want, Jenny. RJA Vu. Oh, those are the ones. Okay. I'll take a look later. Checkings account. Yep. VBR. I want a lot. I don't have a check. Put it all in checkings account. Okay. Very good answers. So, would you rather have $100 now or $100 in a year? Why? Nav.
I would have it now because in 100 in a year it will be 2% less valuable, or more or less valuable. But
Or
because inflation will take over.
Yeah, same
Because
here.
okay, yeah, that's a very good answer. What was I gonna say? And remember, it's not just 2%, right? 2% is the target inflation rate. It varies very much. In fact, until very recently, where we've hit like almost 4% inflation, the last decade has been mainly very low inflation, like almost like I think hovering over near 1%. And that's an issue that the economy faced for a long time. So it's not necessarily 2%, but inflation does usually happen. Now, what I will say is that your argument wouldn't hold up in a period of deflation, which is the opposite of inflation, right? Where money in the future is actually worth more than money now. And that's a whole other issue. But generally speaking, yes, that's true. Inflation makes it that you'd rather have $100 now than $100 in a year. Esther?
I would rather have $100 now because I can use it to buy something that's useful. Like for example, if I have $100 now and spend it on art supplies, I can use the art supplies to get really good at art. But then if I had to wait a year for it, then I wouldn't be as good as art if I spent it on the same thing.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's absolutely right. Andrew?
I would rather get that $100 now because I can either save it and try to get that little bit of interest, or I can invest in it. And after a year, if it's inflation, I guess maybe the investing will beat the inflation. And if it's deflation, well,
It just makes it even better, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's great. Nav, you had one more?
no,
Oh, okay. All right, let's move on. That was a really good discussion. And you guys are absolutely right. Time value money dictates that you should have $100 now, and let's explore why. So generally speaking, time value money, or TVM for short, is this concept that the money you have now is worth more than the same money, is worth more than that same sum of money in the future. So TVM is true given that money can earn interest, right? So any amount of money is worth more the sooner it is received. So essentially what this is saying is that the ability for you to turn current money into more money through saving, or even like, I think a better example is investing, makes it worth more than the same amount of money in the future. So to fully understand TVM, though, we have to start with the power of compounding interest. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand why it's not really an inflation issue, but it's more of a issue of what you can do with your money now that will allow it to grow more and make it more valuable than the same amount of money in the future. Does everybody get that? Any questions? All right, perfect. Because if you don't get that, because this is a huge foundation of today's lesson. So if you don't get that, please stop me now, so then I can try to clarify it. But sounds good. Looks like no. So looks like people get it. So let's look at the power of compounding interest. So we don't know for sure whether he said this or not, but a quote that was attributed to Einstein, he said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't understand it, he who doesn't pays it. So hopefully we'll all understand compound interest. And I have this little video for you. I'm not sure if I'm sharing sound, but just let me know if I'm
When
not.
it comes to interest, it isn't always simple, but it doesn't need to be difficult to understand. Basically, interest usually falls into one of two groups, simple or compound. But what is the difference? And why did Albert Einstein reportedly call compound interest the eighth wonder of the world? Here's a quick crash course. First stop, what is interest? Let's take the example of savings accounts. Interest is the money paid to you by the bank as a reward for keeping your money with them. The interest is shown as a percentage, usually expressed per year, and is calculated based on the amount of money in your account. Simple interest is just that, simple. The interest rate is applied to the amount in your account, principal only. For example, if you have $1,000 earning 2% interest for a year, it would grow to $1,020 when the interest is paid at the end of the year. So the interest you receive over a certain period is a fixed percentage of the principal amount you deposited. How is compound interest different, you may ask? You could have heard it referred to as a magical interest, and there's a reason for that. Basically, you earn interest on the money you've deposited and also on the interest you've already earned. In other words, your interest earns interest. If you deposited the $1,000 into an account with a compound interest, earning 2% per year compounded monthly, you would have $1,020.18 at the end of the first year. This is because the interest is applied after the first month. Then the interest rate for month 2 is applied to the principal and interest, and so on. So your money can grow at an accelerated rate over time. The impact is harder to see in the early years, but eventually it becomes quite pronounced. Looking at our examples over a number of years can demonstrate the difference. Let's say you invested $1,000 every year into an account earning 5% simple interest each year and decided to withdraw the interest at the end of each year. Over the 30 years, you would have saved $30,000 and earned $23,250 interest on top of that. If you made the same investment with interest compounding monthly, with the same savings and 5% interest rate over the same 30-year period, your interest earned would increase to $41,247.57, with a total balance of $71,247.57. That's almost double the amount of interest earned when compared with our simple interest example. The extra interest is generated as a result of monthly compounding and leaving your interest in the account to earn additional interest over time. So the sooner you put your money into an account that is earning compound interest and leave it there, the faster your money will accumulate and the larger your savings will become. It's also worth remembering compound interest can work against you when you are the one paying it, such as with credit cards. So keep this in mind when considering your options. When it comes to compound interest, we tend to agree with Mr. Einstein, who also supposedly said that those who understand it, earn it, and those who don't, pay it. Which camp would you prefer to be in?
Okay, that was a brief little introduction of compound interest. Does everybody get that? Any questions? All right, perfect.
When it comes to interest,
Oh.
it is
That's great. Lovely. Thank you for that. All right. So I have a story that really illustrates this immense power of compounding interest. And I don't know if any of you have heard it before, but here it goes. So basically, there was once this king in India who was a very big chess enthusiast, and he had the habit of challenging wise visitors to like a game of chess. So one day, this traveling visitor, the sage, was challenged by the king. And the sage, having played this game for all his life with people all over the world, he accepted the king's challenge, right? So he thought he would win. So to motivate his opponent, the king offered any award that the sage could name. So the sage, modestly asked for just a few grains of rice in the following manner. So if you were to put a single grain of rice on the first chess square and then double it on every consequent one. So then the king accepted the sage's request, right? So it would just go, hold on. So basically he loses the game, right? So, and then the king orders a bag of rice to be brought to the chessboard. So then he starts placing these rice grains according to the arrangement. So 1 on the first square, 2 on the second square, 4 on the third, 8 on the fourth, and so on. So following this, this compounding, this exponential growth of the rice payment, the king quickly realized that he was unable to fulfill his promise, right? Because and you'll see the numbers here. Hold on. On the 64th square, the king would have to pay more than 9 quintillion grains of rice, which is equal to about 210 billion tons. And that is like almost sufficient enough to cover the entire territory of India with a meter thick layer of rice. So if you can visualize that. So it was at this point that the sage told the king that he doesn't have to pay the debt immediately, but can do so over time. Right. So, and that's how he became the wealthiest person in the world. And that just illustrates, the power of compounding interest. It might start off small, even though you might be starting off with 1 grain of rice or a little bit of savings, that can grow to unfathomable numbers if you play your cards right. Right. So that's the general idea of time value of money and compounding interest. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. So present and future value, very important concepts within time value of money. And here's where the math comes in. So let's start with future value. So future value is the value of a current asset at a future date based on an assumed rate of growth or an assumed interest rate, right? So the future value is important to investors and financial planners because they use it to estimate how much an investment made today will be worth in the future. Knowing this value, this very important value, enables investors to make really sound investment decisions based on their anticipated needs. That being said, though, as mentioned by a lot of you earlier, external economic factors such as inflation can really adversely affect future value of the asset by eroding its value. What exactly is an asset? Well, it's basically a really broad term, but it can be defined as any resource with economic value. So, for example, a sum of money, share in company stock, property can all be considered types of assets. Assets is a very broad term that you can assign to a lot of things. Here's a very good example of future value and how to calculate for it, and I'll share the formula in a bit. And I think this is you all might want to write this down if you want to follow along with me. So here's the example. So say you're saving money in a 1% annual interest rate account for 30 years. So then the present value, let's say you deposit $10,000 right now. So that's your present value. And then you do this calculation here, and I'll show the formula in a bit. And that's the same one I think we did, except with $30,000 for the after class work. But that leaves you with a future value of $13,478.49. Does that make sense to everyone? Please raise your hand if that doesn't, and I'll quickly clarify it. All right, sounds good. Here's the future value formula. Write this down if you don't know it or want to follow along with me. The future value is equal to the present value times 1 plus the interest rate raised to the power of n, or the number of compounding periods. That should be fairly intuitive. I know we have a wide range of people in this class, so if you don't understand the exponent, that's just like 1 plus I times itself n many of times, if that makes sense. All right, that's the future value formula. So remember, it's going to be pretty important for the stuff we do really soon. So let's look at future value's counterpart, present value. So present value is the current value of the asset, right? And we kind of saw this with here, we were given the present value here because we know the present value of the asset. So why are we learning about present value? Well, this asset is usually this asset usually a future sum of money or a source of money based on a given rate of growth or interest rate, right? We already know the present value of current assets, but what about the present value of assets we obtain in the future, right? Remember when I said that I can either give you $100 now or $100 in a year? Well, what if I asked you, let's say I do give you $100 in a year. How much money is that worth to you right now? And that's where present value comes in. So here's a present, here's a present value example. Say you're going to be receiving $40,000 in 2 years in a 2% annual interest rate account. Or okay, let's say, sorry, I didn't really, this example, well, let me re-clarify this example. So basically, rather than receiving $40,000 now, that you would have deposited in a 2% annual interest rate for 12 years, you are instead receiving it in 12 years. So how much is that to you right now? How much money is that worth to you right now? Well, you have to work backwards, right? Yeah, so you have the future value here, $40,000, and then you actually divide, and we'll look at this formula really quickly. But it's the same. It's kind of the same idea, right? You have 1.02 for that 2% annual interest rate raised to the 12th, which is 12 years, number of compounding periods, and then you have present value right there. And here's the formula. some of you might notice that these two are basically the same formula. If you just rearrange it, you can have FV is equal to PV times 1 plus I to the nth. If you just times both sides by 1 plus I to the nth. So yeah, very simple to understand. You really just need to know one formula. This is just two ways to arrange it. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Please send Matthew or I questions. Actually, well, please send, if you're sending questions through chat, please send them to Matthew because I can't see them, but you can also feel free to raise your hand. All right, I have two questions for you all, and I'm going to walk through them in, let's say, I'll give you all 5 minutes. I don't know. I'll give you all, we have to run through things pretty quickly, so I'll give you all 2 minutes to try to do these. But don't worry, like I wouldn't expect you all to finish them, but it's fine. I'll walk through them with you. So these two questions, starting now. So if you remember the formulas, try to use them accordingly. Question 2 might require a little more intuition, but I believe in you all. I hope you all can do that one as well. Okay, I believe that is about 2 minutes. Don't worry if you haven't gotten it. I hope at least people have gotten mostly through question 1, and then we'll look at question 2. And
I know that for question 1, he gains more than $3,000.
Yeah, I mean, okay, we'll go over the calculations, but hopefully you have a more specific number. And wait, let me check the chat. Oh, Matthew, you sent that to me privately. I don't know if that was meant for me privately. Okay, but let's go over it. So first question, what is the balance in an account at the end of 10 years if $2,500 is deposited today and the account earns 4% compounded annually? This is a very simple future value problem, right? So yes, Jerry?
3,700.
3,700. I believe that is right. I'm gonna have to do the calculations, but let's see. 1.04 raised to the 10th. And yep, $3,700.61. Good job. So that was a very simple future value problem. Okay, second question is a present value problem, and yes, Esther.
I was gonna say that I got 214.94 for the second question.
I have my answer in front of me. I don't think that's right. But you can check my work too, because I might be making a mistake. But this one's a little more difficult, right? Because it's not compounded annually. So what you have here is use the present value formula. You have $20,000 divided by, now this is interesting. You have one plus, Dante, was that a hand?
Oh, I just put my hand up because I have an answer. But
Oh no, well, actually, what's your answer?
well, the answer I got was $6,439.46.
I'm not sure how you got that either.
I don't know what I'm looking at. Let me see.
Yeah, wait, hold on. Let me get through this. One plus, here we go. One plus, and here's the interesting part, and please do remember this if you are doing that, if when you're doing the after class work, zero, you have 0.12 divided by 4, because you have that annual interest rate divided by 4, because you're compounding quarterly. So then, well, what do you raise this interest? Well, what do you raise this to? You're not raising it to 10 years. You're not raising it to 10 because you have 4 compounding periods within 10 years. So you actually have 40. And that gives you $6,131.14 if we're rounding here. Does that make sense to everybody? This is a pretty big leap from the first problem, but it's something that is very important to know. Please raise your hand if you don't understand, or please send a question if you want some clarification to Matthew, and then I'll try to check the chat as well. Okay, then let's move on. I think we can also go over the after class work for today's after class work tomorrow as well, just so we can check that people are on the right page. But let's move on to the final topic before our game, loan decision making. Let me go back to my notes here. So loan in the most simple terms is an agreement in which a sum of money is lent to another party in exchange for future payment of the value and possible interest. So this graphic illustrates the dynamics of a loan really well. So firstly, a lender with money gives a borrower an amount of money known as the principal. Then after a set amount of time, usually dictated by the terms of the loan, which are kind of like quote unquote the rules on the loan, the borrower returns the principal amount of money, including an amount of interest dictated by an agreed upon rate rather. So this is a very basic rudimentary form of a loan, but it's pretty easy to understand. Please stop me if it doesn't, and I can try to clarify, but usually things are much more complicated in the real world. Like most loans in the real world actually require monthly payments from the borrower to the lender that consists of paying the interest for that month, along with paying down a fraction of the principal payment. And that's what people mean by paying down their loans. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression, but we'll explore this more realistic model through the following slides. So here's what we have. So how does a loan get paid off over time? Well, this process is called amortization. So amortization is defined as the process through which a loan gets paid off. So here are some graphics. So let's say you receive a loan. Over time, you have to pay back this amount, or the principal plus interest. And this kind of goes back to our model here, right? Very simple. But it's not that simple usually for these monthly payment loans. So how does the payment work? So each month, usually loans are compounded monthly. So each month you have accrued amount of interest, right? So that's a little bit here, this blue tip. Each monthly payment, the amount that you're paying has to cover the month's interest, but it can also cover some principal. Usually you have a fixed payment amount, so then it covers the interest and the principal. And once you have that, you've paid down the principal by a little bit, so then the remaining principal is smaller and you're making progress on your loan. Does that make sense? Okay. So then how do payments change over the life of loan? So you're still paying the same amount, right? You see these boxes are still the same size. You usually always pay the same amount unless you have, an adjustable rate, which we can get into later. But basically, as the principal gets smaller with each payment, less interest accrues, right? And that makes sense. If you have less principal overall, then you're going to have less interest on top of that. So when early on, you usually pay much more interest because there is more interest, but later on, you'll pay more principal. By the time that you pay your by the time that you submit your final payment, that's all principal. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so then we have our final part, loan decision making, choosing the right loan, right? And this is really important for the game that we're about to play. So here we go. So when it comes to taking out a loan, right, hold on, let me pull up the right slide. When it comes to taking out a loan, right, choosing the right one is really crucial to ensuring that loan debt doesn't become a financial burden. You don't want compound interest to work against you. So how you do this is you compare loan terms, and loan terms are like the quote unquote rules of the loan. So the first thing you should look at, or rather you should look at all these things together in conjunction with each other and make calculations. But the first thing that we want to look at is the repayment period. So the shortest period usually yields the lowest amount of overall interest, but it could increase periodic payments. So what this means is that you usually want your loans to be as short as possible, but what that could also mean is that you might have higher monthly payments, but you don't want it to be longer because you might be paying more over that longer stretch of period opposed to a shorter one. Really depends on your financial situation if you're able to afford those monthly payments, those higher monthly payments for shorter loans. But usually the shorter the period, the less you're paying overall. All right, the next one. Interest rate, very simple. You want a smaller interest rate on your loans, right? Because the smaller the interest rate, the lower the interest payments, and the less time it really takes for you to pay it down. You don't want to get bogged down in a very high interest rate. That's compound interest working against you. Okay. Your principal. So you want to owe as less to a lender as much as possible, right? You want to owe as less as possible. That makes sense. Because owing less to a lender also yields lower payment of interest. You can have 2% interest on on two different things, but the option that has a smaller principal is going to yield less interest, and it's going to take less time to pay down. The final thing is periodic payments. So periodic payments, so ensure that these usually monthly payments, these monthly payments specified by the loan terms are not financially burdensome. So make sure that when they're specifying how much you need to pay each month to pay down the loan, that it's not going to be financially detrimental to you. So these are the four things to consider. The first three kind of are what are really important for the game we're about to play. So please try to keep these in mind about the repayment period, interest rate, total amount owed. So now we're going to play Shady Sam, a loan shark game. So remember when, and here I'm going to try to answer Sean's question here from earlier. Remember when I said, anyone, you can try to borrow money from anyone, not just banks, right? Because usually you think of, oh, where do you borrow money? You think you go to the bank. But that's not necessarily true. You can borrow money from many different financial institutions. A lot of these institutions, however, don't really act in good faith. They're out there actively to try to use the power of compounding interest against you, right? So you have to really be careful. These people are called loan sharks, and they're out to offer you bad loan deals to suck you into, a cycle of debt where you keep making payments. You keep making these really high monthly payments. You keep incurring more debt. You keep paying all these random fees. So in this game, you pretend to be a loan shark. So basically, you're acting as a loan shark. So you'll learn the tricks of the quote unquote loan trade as you play this role of a loan shark. And the goal is to maximize your profits. You want to be as exploitive as possible. So here are some tips, maximize the loan payments, interest rates, and the term lengths. Remember from what we just talked about, we want to do the opposite of what we just talked about because you're on the opposing end now. You want to charge lenders, or you want to charge borrowers as much money as possible. And of course, always look for ways to trick your clients into paying more money. And hopefully through this exercise, you'll understand how to recognize these bad loan deals and through these loan sharks. Before we start, does that make sense to everyone? Okay, perfect. Let me drop the game link in the
So
chat.
as a summary, we're trying to be bad guys, trying to rip innocent people off of their money.
Wait, if we're learning this at a young
Yeah.
age, won't we be like, and we make a lot of money, won't we be like exploitive to our own self and think to ourselves, wait, this is a very good way to get money and easy.
Well,
We do it in our later years.
I hope your sense of morality is stronger than that. I'm just saying, look, this is a very good exercise from the opposing viewpoint to show to see, how exactly people might wish to exploit you and how to recognize like good loan terms by, trying to recognize bad loan terms, if that makes sense. Okay, here's the game link. Have at it. It is actually a very fun game. And in the end, once you finish, we can put in how much money you've made in the chat, so we can see how well everybody did. But yeah, have fun, and we'll be back. Well, actually, Matthew, you don't mind playing the game for timing reasons again, would you, Matthew? Okay, Matthew's gone. Andrew, you had a hand?
It says you have to type in your first name. Can you just randomly choose a name?
Yeah, it's fine. You don't have to type in your actual name. All right, let's do this. How about we start the game? Everybody turn their cameras off. And then once you finish the game, turn your camera back on and type in your score in the chat. And that way I know that people are done. So right now, turn your cameras off. Once you're done, type your score in the chat, turn your camera back on, and I'll see you all in a quick minute.
There's no sound in the game. I'm kind of sad.
Yeah, it seems like it was produced with less quality than the Magician game. Okay, it is 11:40. And hopefully everybody can get back on their cameras and we can wrap up with a discussion here about the game. So that's my first question. How'd it go for everyone? Did everybody understand what was going on?
Yes.
Yeah.
You were
Yes.
trying to cheapskate people that had like their uncle,
Tied.
uncle something, uncle died, and then you're cheapskating his own casket. And then you have another one which wants to follow their dreams, but turns out it's terrible because they just lost another
Yeah, another one broke their
$100,000.
leg. Another one. was
Yeah.
like-
and
So look, so like, what does that tell you? Like when you're in these difficult financial situations, you want to be really careful when you're making these loan decisions, and you want to really look into those loan terms, right? And see what exactly is the lender offering me, right? And how much is that going to cost me in the long run? So yeah, that's the general idea. Did some people get this adjustable rate mortgage option?
I didn't. I don't think I did anyway.
Sarah, did
I
you?
got like 134 million.
It's the one with the house, right?
Yeah.
It's like with the market, the
Yeah.
interest changes in the market.
Did you understand how that works, Sarah? Because I
mean-
didn't explain that, but you know.
A bit, I think.
Yeah, so and actually I think I'll talk about this more tomorrow, but for an adjustable, and I think we're going to talk about this when we talk about mortgages tomorrow. But just a quick preview, adjustable rate mortgages, like usually the interest rate is fixed, right? But for adjustable rate mortgages, it fluctuates, and usually they're pinned to a certain treasury rate or some prime rate. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow, but it's usually if you play your cards right, or if you know exactly how or if you can predict how well these interest rates are going to act, then an adjustable rate could be better for you. But usually you can often get screwed over by adjustable rate, so it's quite volatile. So in that option, Sarah, I don't know if you did this, but you would pick adjustable rate to try to screw over people more. Yeah, perfect. All right. Was there anything else that people noticed? Any observations?
I just gotta add something real quick to the adjustable rate thing, because this relates to something that we experienced recently. So you know how we had the COVID-19 pandemic, and if you guys might not have noticed, but the interest rates and mortgage rates dropped like a lot, right? They've been the lowest in history. And in this situation, the correct choice would be to get a fixed rate. Because the interest rates are so low, getting a fixed rate would be better because you're getting a better deal, because it's already very low in history. It'll only go up. This is obviously this prediction in it, but when the interest rate is extremely low, like what happened during COVID, they're at historical lows, it's obviously best to do fixed, because then you're with that really, really low mortgage rate for a long time. Whereas if you chose fluctuating or not fixed, what would happen is as time went on, as situations got better, your interest rate would go up, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we'll look into that more tomorrow as we talk about mortgages and other different types of loans. But in the meantime, I think that's all I have for you all. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out to Matthew or I. Here's our information, my email, my phone number. I'm always available, usually. So yeah, thanks for coming, and I hope to see you all tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.